Hi, I'm Eric Siegel with ericstrains.com, and welcome to episode 37 of my video train blog series. Okay, it's mid-August 2013, and in this episode I'm just going to be focusing on one thing, the new stainless steel trestle section that's in the main room. So right now I'm going to show you the progress that I've made on the trestle, and then after that I've got a little tutorial for you. Okay, here's the newest stainless steel trestle section. If you're one of those people who only follow me on YouTube, then the last time you saw this section was in episode 36 of my video train blog series, and it looks a lot different than it did in that episode. If you're one of those people who also follow me on Facebook, then you've been able to see some of the day-to-day progress on this bridge. Now, if you only follow me on YouTube and you want to see some of the day-to-day progress on the layout, follow me on Facebook, because I post several pictures a week on Facebook, and that will allow you to see some of the little stuff I do on the layout on a day-to-day basis. So anyway, it looks a lot different than it did last time. For one thing, it's painted for the most part. And I've done some salt weathering on it, so it looks nice and corroded, and it's got peeling paint and so forth. I've also started working on the concrete piers down below that the support towers anchor into. I've also done some mountain work over here. I've had it come out and meet the bridge. And I've even started working on the deck up top. When I started painting the trestle, I originally wanted to do sort of a rusty brown color for the entire trestle. I wanted to make it look a lot like this steel trestle over here. That's the color I was going for. But then one night as I was working on the trestle, it occurred to me that if I painted it a different color, I could do some salt weathering and make it look really cool with some peeling paint and rust and corrosion and so forth. And so I decided to do a different color, and ultimately I decided to go with this sort of institutional green color like you might see on a highway overpass or some other public structure. And overall I think it looks really good. You can see how the salt weathering gives it that peeling paint, rusty, corroded look. And at the bottoms of the support structures you can see there's some really good corrosion down there. So I'm really happy with it. You know, just like anything else, there are some spots that I would probably want to do over again if I could, but by and large, I'm very happy with it. This is the first time I've done salt weathering on a scale this big, and I couldn't be happier with it. I think it looks really cool. I mentioned these concrete piers that the support towers are anchored to. These are made from wooden dowels that I've painted up to look like concrete. The way that I do it is that I take the wooden dowels and I sand them really smooth, then I rub them up with joint compound, which is basically plaster of Paris, and that sort of fills in all of the wood grain and all of the inconsistencies and holes in the wood and gives it a more concrete texture. Then I sand that down and I paint it with a gray primer spray paint, and it gives it this really nice concrete pier look. So these over here are done. They're not weathered yet. I still have to weather them. I'm going to add some rust streaks and so forth. But technically speaking, they're done over here. And then over here, you can see I haven't gotten to these yet. These are still the raw wood dowels. So this is sort of a before over here. And over here, you've got the after. I also mentioned that I did some mountain work. Before I had the trestle in place, the mountain ended back here. And then when I finally put the trestle in place, as you can see, the trestle came to right here. So I had a gap from here to here that had to be filled in. So I brought the mountain out to meet the trestle. So all of this is brand new. And then I built this concrete box to contain the trestle. And then within the box, you can see the actual bridge shoes that the trestle sits on. These bridge shoes are made of metal, and they can be purchased from Scenic Express. And then I weathered them a bit to add some rust streaks, and you can see the rust streaking down the concrete box. I think that looks pretty good. And overall, I think this extension looks great. Lastly, let's talk about the deck. As you can see, it's coming along very nicely. It's not done yet, but it is getting there. And the deck comes all the way down to here. And this is where I ran out of Atlas Flex Track. I've ordered some more, so as soon as that comes in, I'll be able to finish it all the way down to the end of this trestle section. Now, if you're wondering how I do the deck, I'll show you real quick. When I first got the trestle, this is what the deck looked like. Just a flat surface, nothing fancy. So the first thing I did was I secured the track down to the trestle. I did that by driving sheet metal screws through the track and into the stainless steel trestle. Then after that, I started the process of boxing all of this in so that I could eventually ballast the track. So the first step was to put these little extensions out because these extensions will eventually hold the walkways. These extensions and these strips here are strips of basswood. They're 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch strips that I've cut and painted black. And then once I had that done, I could box it in and then ballast the track, and you can see it's all ballasted. And then once that was done, I had these extensions out here to build the walkways on. The walkways are also made out of basswood. They're 1/8 by 1/16 inch strips, and I cut them all and painted them and put them in place to make the walkways. It's not really hard work, but it is very tedious and time consuming, but I think it's worth it. I think it looks pretty good. Now again, it's not done yet. I still need to add the handrails, and then I'll need to weather the handrails and the deck. But other than that, it looks pretty good, and I'm very happy with it. Now, as I've been working on this trestle for the past few weeks, it's occurred to me that there's a good opportunity for a how-to video. And I've gotten a lot of requests from you guys asking me how to do the salt weathering. What's that all about? So, if you'll notice, this support tower is still unpainted. And I've left it that way so that I could show you guys how I transform the raw stainless steel tower into something that looks like this with the salt weathering and the corrosion and the peeling paint and so forth. So what we're going to do is take this support tower up to the garage, and I will briefly show you the steps that I take to transform it from this to this. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we're outside and I've got the trestle support tower ready to be painted. It's a windy day. In fact, it'll probably rain soon, so I apologize if any wind gets in the microphone and makes it hard to hear what I'm saying. Now, before I put this trestle support tower out, I did give it a good wipe down just to get rid of any dust and debris that might have been on it. It doesn't have to be perfect, just give it a good light cleaning before you paint it. Now, I do want to put a bit of a disclaimer out there before we get started, because I know there are a lot of wise guys out there on YouTube. So I want to say that I know there are lots of ways to paint trestles and lots of ways to weather trestles. This is just the method that I use. I'm just trying to show you my process. I'm not claiming to be an expert. There are lots of ways to do this. And if you think you've got a better way, by all means use it. You don't have to use this method. I'm just trying to show you what I personally do when I paint and weather my trestles. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is put a coat of primer on the trestle support tower. In this case, we're going to use Rust-Oleum Rusty Metal Primer. This will give it a nice bright red rusty finish, and it's a nice coat of primer that will support all of the other layers of paint that we'll be putting on it. So let's go ahead and do this. The key when you're doing the paint is to do several light coats. You don't want to try to do it all at once. If you try to do it all at once, you will fail. There are no two ways about it. You don't want to rush it. You want to be patient and do several small light coats. Okay, so I'm going to hold the paint can about 6 inches away or so and just do a light coat, just like that. Okay, that's the first coat. I'm going to wait about 5 or 10 minutes and then I'll do a second coat. Okay, the second coat is on, so I'm going to go ahead and let it dry for about 2 hours, and then I'll flip the entire structure over and paint the underside. It's been a couple hours, so let's go ahead and flip it over and paint the underside. Okay, the rusty metal primer is dry, and if you wanted to, you could stop right here. This is a really nice red color. A lot of people like this color, and they use it on their layouts a lot. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm going to keep on going. The next color I'm going to use is this Rust-Oleum Camouflage Brown. This is a fantastic color because it looks like old, dirty rust. You know, a lot of people think that rust has to be red like that, but in my opinion, it doesn't. It needs to be more about dark oranges and browns, and that's what this color is all about. So we're going to put a few coats on this support tower, and what's going to happen is that when we paint it green and do the salt weathering, this is going to be the color that pokes through the peeling paint and the corrosion, and it'll look really cool. Now, I'm going to put on more of this camouflage brown than I did the rusty metal primer. I want a more thick base of this, but again, I'm not going to do it all at once. I'm going to do several thin coats. Okay, I put about 4 or 5 coats of the Rust-Oleum Camouflage Brown on the support tower, and I let it dry overnight so it's ready for the next step. And again, if we wanted to stop right here, we could. There's nothing wrong with this color, and in fact, that's the color I was originally going to make this trestle, just like the other steel trestle that I have. This is a really nice, dirty, rusty brown, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with stopping here, but we're going to go one more step and do the fun part now, which is salt weathering. What is salt weathering? Well, as its name implies, salt weathering is weathering that is done with salt. Specifically, we're going to be using sea salt. This is the most inexpensive brand of sea salt I could find. I think I got it at Kroger. The brand doesn't matter. What matters is that it's inexpensive sea salt. And what we're going to do is we're going to encrust the support tower in the sea salt, and once that's done, we will paint the tower the final color that we want it to be, which in this case is green. And then once the green paint is dry, we'll flick off the grains of salt, and that will result in a tower that looks like it has peeling paint and corrosion, and it'll look really, really cool. Now, you need to use sea salt. You cannot use table salt or even kosher salt because the grains are too small and too uniform in size. The grains of sea salt are large and they're irregular, and that makes them perfect for what we're about to do. So you need to use sea salt. Again, it doesn't need to be expensive. Get the cheapest sea salt you can find, but it needs to be sea salt. Okay, I'm ready to go. I put down a sheet of tin foil to catch some of the excess salt because when you do this, most of the salt is going to fall off of the structure that you're salt weathering. And if you have something below to catch it, you can recycle that salt. You can dry it out and use it later. I've got a bottle of water with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol in it. The alcohol helps the water evaporate a little faster, which speeds up the process. And then I've got my sea salt. So what we're going to do is we're going to spray and wet down the support tower. And I've done enough of these support towers where I know that I need to work from the inside out. So I'm doing the inside surfaces first, then I'll do the outside surfaces. But, you know, we get it wet, nice and wet like that. And then we're going to put the sea salt on. And so what I do is I pour a little in my hand, and I just start dropping it on there. Just like that. You want to be random about it. You don't want to try to be too neat or too uniform. And you want to clump it up like that. You want big clusters of salt. You don't want to space it out and have just little individual grains. So, just like that. And the way this works is kind of like on a margarita glass. You know, when they wet the glass and they put the grains of salt on top? Same thing here. We're wetting the structure, and then when the water evaporates, it'll leave the salt encrusted to the support tower. So I'm just going to keep on doing it like this. And you want to resist the temptation to not do a lot of salt. When I did my first tower, I was really conservative and I didn't want to put a lot of salt on because I thought I would overdo it. But actually, you do want to overdo it because the end result will be far less dramatic than it looks right here. If you looked at it right now, you'd think, oh my gosh, there's going to be no green paint on this thing because you've covered it in salt. But that's not the case. Plenty of green paint will get through. So you actually want to overdo it a little bit. That's what I've learned in this process, is that you want to fight the temptation to be conservative and just actually go a little heavier than you think it should be. So I'm just going to keep on doing this over the entire structure. Now I'm going to do the inside of one of the support legs. So again, I'm going to spray it down and then drop my salt down. And again, you want to have big clumps of salt. That's corrosion gold right there. I like to do a lot of it at joints and corners. So like anywhere where there's a joint where metal comes together to form a joint, I'll put a big old clump of salt because that'll make a really nicely corroded joint or corner. And on these little crossbars, I like to get a lot on there too. And you can see it's using up a lot of salt. We're wasting a lot of salt. A lot of it's dropping onto the tin foil. That's normal. This is one of my favorite spots on these towers. At the feet, you know, as you put salt on the entire structure, just naturally all sorts of salt will fall down onto these feet, and it'll get all caked up like you see here. This is great. Don't clean that up. It's totally organic, and it will look fantastic when we're done with this thing, because you will have this totally cool corroded look down here at the feet. It'll look awesome. I can't wait to show you. Okay, the entire support tower is now encrusted in sea salt, and as you can see, I used an entire can. You don't want to be conservative. There's a lot of wasted salt down here, but I'll let that dry out and reuse it again for another salt weathering project. So now we're just going to wait for it to dry. You want all the water out of it before you paint it, so I'm going to let it dry overnight, and then we'll paint it green. Okay, it's been a couple days. We actually had a little bit of a weather delay because it rained for 2 days straight. Now, I pulled the support tower into my garage so that it wouldn't get wet, but all of the rain and the humidity and the low temperatures that the rain brought in caused the water that was on the salt to not evaporate very quickly, and so eventually I had to do something I've never had to do before. I had to pull out my heat gun and blow some hot air on this thing just to get that water to start evaporating, but it's all gone now. The salt is nice and crispy. We've got a really nice crust all over this thing. So what we're going to do now is paint it green. This is the color that I'm going to use. This is Rust-Oleum Satin Moss Green. This is the color that I like, but you can use any color you want. Now the key is to go very gently with the first coat of paint because there's not a whole lot that's holding this salt onto the bridge. The only thing holding it is the salt bond. So just like the salt on a margarita glass, it's very fragile. So if you were to bump this thing or jostle it in any way, a bunch of the salt would fall off. So when you spray it, you want to stay about 6 or 8 inches back because if you get any closer, the force of the spray itself will knock off a lot of salt. Now, from 6 or 8 inches back, you're still going to knock off some of the salt. That's okay, but you won't knock off near as much if you're back here as if you were up here. So we're going to put a very thin, very gentle first coat on. Okay, I put a couple coats of the green paint on. It's all dry, so now comes the fun part. We're going to chip away some of this salt and take a look at what's underneath. Okay, let's peel away some of this salt and take a look at what's underneath. Oh yeah, look at that. See, there's the green paint, and then now here's all the paint that's rusted off. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of the salt off of this support tower, and then we'll take it down to the layout and we'll finish it up. Look at that there. That just looks incredible already. There's absolutely no way you can replicate this kind of work other than doing salt weathering. Just the randomness of the peeling paint and the corrosion, it looks so natural, so organic. Just looks great. I can't wait to see this on the layout. And this isn't even done yet. When we take it down to the layout, I'm going to finish it. I'm going to do a wash on it, get it looking nice and pretty, and it's going to look fantastic. Okay, I've removed all the salt. It took about 2 hours to get all the salt off this thing because it has so many little nooks and crannies that the salt likes to hide in. If this was a box car, you could get the salt off pretty fast. But because this thing has so many facets and surfaces, it does take a while to get all of the salt removed. But it's worth it because, as you can see, it looks fantastic. Once all the salt is gone, there are a few more steps to do before this thing's ready to go back on the layout. Some of those steps I've already done, and some I still need to do. The first thing I did once all the salt was off was I went over this thing with some really fine sandpaper, like 400 grit. I just did a quick pass on every surface just to get rid of any weird inconsistencies that may have been there and to give the whole thing a more uniform look. You don't want to overdo it because there's some really cool textures going on here, and if you overdo it with the sanding paper, you could get rid of those. You don't want to do that. Just a quick pass with really, really fine sandpaper is all that's needed. After I was done with the sandpaper, I hit this thing with an air duster and went over it with a damp cloth just to get rid of any dust that the sandpaper created. And then I did touch-up work. You know, when you take the salt off this thing, most of it will come off by hand, but eventually you have to use a tool of some sort to get into the cracks and crevices to get all that salt out. And I like to use this little metal pointy tool. It's really good for getting into those cracks and crevices, but inevitably it will cause scratches that will go all the way down to the stainless steel. You'll slip or go too hard, and you'll just scratch it a little too much. And so you have to do some touch-up work Well, I use this for the touch-up work. What this is decanted spray paint. I've taken that Rust-Oleum camouflage brown spray paint and decanted it into this bottle so that I can brush it on whatever surface I need to. So what I'll do is I'll take a brush and just go and do touch-up work on any scratches that I put on the tower while I was taking off the salt. And because this is the same color that's under this green paint, it's a perfect match. The next two steps that I need to do involve this oil paint. This is Winsor & Newton Burnt Umber oil paint. And the first thing I'm going to do is make a wash. I'm going to take a little of this paint and mix it with water and make a really thin wash. And then I'll coat this entire structure in that wash. And what it'll do is it'll give kind of a rust after image to the whole thing, so that even on the green spots, it won't be a pure green. It'll be a green with just a real thin after image of rust, like maybe rust ran down it when it was raining or something like that. So I'll do a wash on the entire structure. Then once the wash is dry, I'll take a really thin brush and take some of this burnt umber paint and go around the structure and do little rust streaks coming down from some of these rust patches, just to add a little more realism. When I'm done with the oil paint, the final step would be to take this thing back up to my garage for just a couple minutes and give it a quick pass with some Testor's Dull Coat, just to serve as a protectant for the paint and the effects that we've put on this thing. And then once that dries, this thing will be done and we can put it back under the trestle on the layout. Okay, there we go. The support tower is back under the trestle and it is done. I even painted the wooden dowels to look like concrete, so they're done too. So it looks pretty good in my opinion. I think this is probably my best salt weathering job yet. You know, just like anything else you do, you get better with experience. So each time I do some salt weathering, I think I get better and better. So this is definitely my best job yet. I think it looks pretty good. Here's a shot of the whole trestle section from a distance. Not bad. So now you know how to do some salt weathering. Hopefully that will get you thinking and maybe doing some salt weathering of your own. Oh, and by the way, while it was raining for 2 days, I worked on the deck here. So now you can see that the track and the walkways go to the end of the trestle section. I still need to do the handrails, but it's looking a lot more complete than it did a few days ago. And there is the remainder of the track hanging off the end of the trestle, waiting for the next trestle section, which should be in place within the next 2 months. Anyway, that about wraps it up for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Eric Siegel, and I'll see you next time.